Greetings from Estonia, from Lahemaa National Park. I am very honored to tell you a story about how local communities have taken care of the cultural heritage of National Park. I am Ave Paulus, Cultural Heritage Specialist of the Environmental Board of Estonia, as well as doctorate student of Tartu University and ICOMOS International Expert on Cultural Landscapes. Some background information about Lahemaa National Park. Lahemaa National Park was founded in 1971 for the protection of nature and culture. During Soviet occupation period, it was like a cradle of Estonian identity to take care of and protect. Palmse Manor, where we are staying currently, is the center of National Park, and it is the first example of what people can do together to protect and conserve heritage. During 70s and 80s, it was actually restored with the help of many Estonian local people, funds and a lot of voluntary work. Lahemaa National Park is 75,000 hectares of land and sea under state protection. Here we have values of nature, habitats, species, as well as culture, both tangible and intangible culture. 36,000 hectares of cultural landscapes are under protection and 20,000 hectares of seascapes. Primary objective of protection here is the interaction of man and nature. That means that heritage communities are in the center of protection. We have 72 villages. Cultural landscapes are privately owned. We have 10,000 landowners and as many local people. When we talk about cultural heritage under protection, what elements we are talking about? In Lahemaa National Park, we have a very vast amount of archaeological landscapes since Bronze Age under protection. Then we have historical settlement structure of these 72 villages. A lot of heritage listed sites like 4 manor complexes like one here. Several thousands of very valuable vernacular architecture elements of 10,000 buildings that we have here. Then we have historical land use under protection, semi-natural habitats, cultural landscapes, agricultural landscapes, and traditional fishing seascapes. Then we have folklore and intangible heritage elements under protection as well. There is no way we can conserve these values of culture without cultural heritage communities. And that's why I'm so honored to tell you a story how we have managed to conserve cultural heritage here during last decade together with heritage communities. What we are talking about? Heritage communities are communities of interest, like we, heritage experts, are communities of interest. Heritage communities are communities of practice, like when we are talking of religious groups, we are talking about heritage communities of practice. And most important communities are local communities, heritage communities that actually own the heritage, that live here, whose heritage it is that we conserve. I am proud to say that in Lahemaa National Park, heritage communities have the rights to decide what is their heritage, to say how we can protect it, and to say how we can introduce and promote it. What principles and mechanisms there are to involve local communities in the government and management of one state-protected area? In Lahemaa National Park, which is state-protected conservation area, we founded Lahemaa National Park Cooperation Council in 2010 with all related parties taking part in it. That means right holders, the most important party that means local communities who own the area and take care of cultural heritage and cultural continuity, as well as other stakeholders, most importantly duty bearers, that means us, the state, who is obliged to keep the values, and local governments who are obliged to take care of people and the areas and development of the areas, as well as other stakeholders, that means State Forest Management Center, tourism entrepreneurs and others. In the Cooperation Council, de jure, we are like a counseling body, but actually de facto, as it is about cultural heritage, there must be consensus of what is defined as heritage, how we manage the heritage and how we introduce the heritage. In Cooperation Council, new rules of Lahemaa National Park were discussed and decided about cultural heritage values, as well as the future, the management plan of Lahemaa National Park 2016 and to 2025 was done actually in the Cooperation Council. It looked like so that we had very solid inventories of all the values from 2006 to 2012 as to tangible heritage. And we planned as to intangible heritage the inventories of the values from 2016 to 2026 made by local communities with the help of the experts. The rules of Lahemaa National Park, the law, was done together as to cultural heritage together with local communities. We had very solid inventories and it was discussed with communities on the village level as well as local government level. So these regulations that are written into rules of Lahemaa National Park are actually accepted by all the parties. So it is so easy to defend them in the courts actually when we have some lawsuits, developer versus local communities or developer versus state. The management plan was done by local communities in the Cooperation Council from 2012 to 2016. It was 60 meetings on all the parts of cultural heritage, about the values, about how we should manage it, how we should protect it. And it was written in 300 pages of management plan as well as maps corresponding it. And actually what we do here currently as to cultural heritage, it goes according to management plan and it is done mostly now as to cultural heritage by the local communities themselves with the help of experts and universities and Environmental Board of Estonia. So one such example of involvement of all right holders and stakeholders in the protection of cultural value is actually sacred natural sites. Here we have House of Native Religions of Estonia as the right holder of these heritage sites. In Lahemaa National Park, we made an inventory together with the Estonian House of Native Religions and Tartu University and found out that in Lahemaa National Park we have approximately 60 sacred natural sites and some of them are in use. 24 are more public sites and there are smaller, only for one community or small villages that are not so famous. The most famous of sacred natural sites of Lahemaa is actually Ilumäe sacred linden tree. It is first records. The tree itself is actually approximately 350–400 years old, and we see that there has been a trunk of the tree before that, so it is a very ancient place. First written records on sacredness of this tree we have from 19th century onwards. In 70s it started to be again as very lively place to make offerings or sacrifices, or when somebody had weddings and so on and so forth. When we after inventories, we thought about how to manage these sites where you practically cannot do anything but this tree was full of plastic and stuff like that. Then we, together with the Estonian House of Native Religions, made here some cleaning works so that all the habits were taken into account and the tree was cleaned from plastic. So another success story of where all related parties are involved in the cultural heritage protection. The outcome is far better than you can imagine. Here we have actually map with the most famous or open sacred natural sites of Lahemaa National Park based on this inventory as well. The most important subject to protect actually in Lahemaa is architecture. Architecture is something very vivid on landscape, and on 72 villages of Lahemaa National Park we have a lot of vernacular architecture under protection. But at the same time it is homes and livelihoods of local people, and they want to build new buildings in this historical environment. How we managed to make together very fine regulations so that the locals are happy and the values are conserved. We first had some very strong inventories of the existing values from 2010 to 2012. All buildings were analyzed, all surroundings were analyzed and proposals of protection made. Then we had, together with the Estonian Union of Architects, competition, 21st century home in Lahemaa. It was very popular. Very many architects were involved in the process, were making works there and were discussing in seminars and workshops about the futures of traditional architecture. Then we had to put all these nice ideas into actually the regulations of building, into the rules of Lahemaa National Park. Together, we, based on the inventories and architectural competition, we made the proposals of regulations to locals and discussed village by village all the building regulations and zoning of Lahemaa National Park's 72 villages and parts of the villages. It was a really massive work with 300 proposals and discussions and arguments from one side and from other. And actually these regulations that are now put into the rules of Lahemaa National Park as well as into the management plan of Lahemaa National Park have acceptance of local communities and villages as well as a state. That means Environmental Board of Estonia thinks that these are regulations that can conserve the values of these villages as well as allow some new buildings in the historical environment. But the regulations themselves don't protect the valuable architecture. Awareness raising and knowledge about how to conserve them protects. That means that we have had since 2006 onwards several workshops every summer that are immensely popular among locals. How to restore old valuable buildings, how to restore fences and so on and so forth. Throughout these workshops, more than 15 buildings have been conserved, as well as more than 3,000 people have learned how to take care of their architecture. So, when we are talking about protection of cultural landscapes, we are mostly talking about the protection of interaction of man and nature. That means nature use by local people. We in Lahemaa have 36,000 hectares of cultural landscapes, semi-natural habitats, grazing lands, forests that are used by locals and seascapes. In 2010 to 2012, we made together with University of Life Sciences of Estonia land cover analysis of a national park. It turned out that 9,000 hectares of previous grazing lands, meadows, coastal meadows, are now in bushes. That means that we need more cattle on the areas. Currently we have 500 sheep, horses and cows. We need 4,500 of them. Luckily, we have quite some enthusiasts, locals, who are taking care of our semi-natural values. We have a very solid collection of Estonian native sheep in Sae farm in Kolga, for example, or in Vanaküla, beautiful species of Estonian heavy draft horses that are currently working in the forest, doing forestry work with horses. Most problematic issue is traditional fishing, because there are certain limits that people can fish. That means that many coastal fishers don't have licenses to fish anymore in the sea. We are working on that as well, and trying to keep alive both fishing traditions and traditional boat building traditions and related intangible heritage. Actually, the thing that we are most proud of is initiative of local communities themselves to make inventories of intangible heritage of their villages. That means that locals themselves collected stories, folklore of their villages, made interviews with the village people and put it on the map of Lahemaa National Park. Now we have approximately 2,000 stories on the maps and 100 interviews with local people. The other positive thing about it is that locals themselves now collect further stories and history of their villages, as well as make the maps, cultural historical maps of their villages, and present themselves it to the tourists and wider public. And the other thing is that not only stories, but the language, old dialects connected with them are now again alive. For example, the Pohiranna coastal dialect here that was approximately dying, let's say, because there was only 100 speakers of this dialect, is now having resurrection period. Young people are learning this dialect, are actually something that we are most proud of, because then we are talking not about only cultural heritage, but about cultural continuity of the area.